Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis will be along shortly. Big game breakdown. Indiana, Notre Dame. It's the first playoff game Friday night. Landis will be there. And we're breaking that down for about an hour of the show today. You know how we do the big game breakdown by now, right? Come on, you folks have been here. Offense, defense, both sides of the ball. We talk a little bit about Marcus Freeman versus Curt Cignetti and the coaching matchup. And then on this show, we're also checking in on Clemson, Texas. That 5-12 matchup, 5-seed Texas, 12-seed Clemson. We're not doing a full big game breakdown on that, but Landis and I talk about it some, and then couldn't think of anybody better, anyone I'd rather have on to talk about this. It's Shehan Jeyarajah, my former partner on the College Football Survivor Show, who is based in Texas, will join us to give his view on Clemson versus Texas, including a quarterback matchup there that they played against each other in the Texas State High School Football Championship, which I'm sure probably was even a bigger deal than this is, frankly, right? Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik, but also Shehan at CBSSports.com picked Ohio State to win the national championship. So we will ask him about that. His view of this. He's a national college football writer, why he picked the Buckeyes. But most of it's going to be Indiana, Notre Dame. Wednesday show, Ohio State, Tennessee, big game breakdown. Thursday show, Penn State, SMU, big game breakdown. And then we'll make the picks. Landis and I on Thursday will make our picks for the 4 first-round games. And we'll make a full bracket pick who we think is going to win the national championship. Speaking of brackets, poolpartygaming.com. Come join us. More than 300 people have joined our bowl pool pick'em and college football playoff bracket contest. Still working out prizes. We'll get you something cool. We're going to do a bracket thing separately, keep those points, do a bowl preview separately, a bowl pool separately, keep those points, and also do a combined thing. So if you go to poolpartygaming.com, you'll see our logo, click to join, you'll put in your email, and then these guys do a great job. The voice today, I'm going to have to be sucking on the water a little bit. I apologize. Can't stop coughing. They do a great job. They're going to send like leaderboard updates to your email. It's all free, of course. And then we'll talk about it here on the show. So it's a good community thing. 20 bowls only involving northern teams. If there's a bowl that has 2 southern teams, we're ignoring it because you can go do that somewhere else. And then the bracket. So we know a lot of you are already in. We'd love to get this thing up over 400 people. Poolpartygaming.com. The first bowl game that we're doing is tonight. Memphis, West Virginia. It's Tuesday night. If you miss tonight, you can still do it. And you only have to pick this bowl game by tonight. It's against the spread and it's the total. Make that pick. And then you can do the other bowls later. And then you just have the bracket in by Friday. So if you think, oh, I don't have time to do this, just go make that Memphis, get signed up and make the Memphis, West Virginia pick quickly. And then try to keep up with the bowls every day. But also if you miss one, obviously you lost 2 points. It's not the end of the world. And also you can still get in the bracket. So we'd love to have you. Poolpartygaming.com. It's a special game they made just for us because we said we don't want Southern bowls. Get them out. They can cram it. Get them out. They're cram it games. So these guys really appreciate their help. They're doing a great job. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about some news because you got to keep up with the portal. Isaac Wilson back out of the portal for Utah. Freshman had to play a bunch this year at quarterback for Utah after the Cam Rising injury. Was the backup quarterback as a true freshman, which is pretty good. Utah, big changes. Jason Beck from New Mexico in as the offensive coordinator. He brought Devin Dampier, the New Mexico quarterback, to Utah. Expect him to be the starter in 2025, but Isaac Wilson, who had gone in the portal, is staying. So that's good news. Devin Dampier, it's a little interesting to me, though. But again, if you like a place and you believe in the people, Isaac Wilson said some things he's excited about this Jason Beck offense. He thinks it'll fit him better. So Devin Dampier has 2 years of eligibility left. And obviously, he's the presumed starter. Isaac Wilson has 3 years left. So he will see how that works out, but it's nice that he stayed in the North. A guy who is on the move, reportedly, Dante Dowdell, the running back at Nebraska, who wound up being their main guy this year. He had been a transfer in from Oregon. It was kind of like a 5-way timeshare early in the year. He won the job. He's in the transfer portal. Not great news. But change is happening. And again, when you get a guy from the portal, then if he goes in the portal again, you can't be shocked, right? Steve Wilfong from On3 was reporting that Michigan, now that Billy Edwards, the Maryland transfer quarterback, signed with Wisconsin when some people had projected him to go to Michigan initially, we still think Michigan is looking for a bridge quarterback to Bryce Underwood, so they are not having to start Bryce Underwood as a true freshman or Jaden Davis as a second-year player who hasn't played at quarterback this year. They still have Davis Warren, but we know that's not good enough. It feels like they could use a veteran. Steve Wilfong on his list. One of the names, and I've seen it elsewhere, Taquan Finn, which would be awesome. From Detroit, former Toledo quarterback, very impressed with him at Toledo. Went in the portal last year. I thought a Big Ten team should have been on him. He wound up at Baylor, was a starter at Baylor, but then lost that job during the year. If he would come back north, I think the chance for Taquan Finn as a Detroit native to be the bridge to Bryce Underwood, who's also a Michigan kid, I think would be fantastic. So let's just keep our eye on that. That's not locked in, but keep our eye on that. We'd be all for that. John Mateer, Washington State quarterback. I've called him Baker Mateer at times on this show because he wears the eye black. He's got a little bit of attitude. Really good player. Really good runner as a quarterback. Can also throw it. He's in the portal. I think people believe he's going to follow his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, who's a super young guy. I think he's 29, was hired by Oklahoma away from Washington State. So we might be losing a guy from the north to somewhere not in the north, which is not great, but things happen. Isaiah World, offensive tackle in the portal from Nevada. Big guy. 3 finalists he's announced. 2 are north, Nebraska and Oregon. Would be a big get for either of those teams. We know Oregon, great tackle situation this year. Can have guys to replace. Would be a huge grab for Nebraska. So watch where he winds up. Jaheim Oates, defensive lineman, one of the better defensive players in the portal at all, from Alabama, has announced he's going to Colorado. Great grab for Colorado. Kyron Hudson, USC receiver, transferring to Penn State. They could use him right now. Maybe the number 1 receiver for Penn State next year. That's a big grab. We knew that. We talked on the show on Monday that Drew Aller has announced he's coming back. It's not binding, but I mean, if Drew Aller throws for 30 touchdowns in the playoff, who knows? But for now, Drew Aller has announced he's planning to stay at Penn State for 2025. They need receiver help. Kyron Hudson from USC is a great start for them. So congrats to Penn State for getting on that quickly. And then Noah Lottolip from Albany was an FCS freshman All-American at tackle. Seemed like there was a decent amount of interest in him. Sounds like he's going to Cincinnati in the portal. So that's a big grab for Cincinnati. One sec. Oh, the dry throat of the winter. You know where they don't have this problem? In the South. But that's what we deal with. We'd rather have a dry throat and live here and follow these college football teams because that's how we do it in the North. All right, enough of me coughing. Poolpartygaming.com. Go there, sign up Tuesday night so you do not miss any stuff. But again, even if you miss it, don't give up. Still, Doug told me to do it on Tuesday and I forgot. Wake up Wednesday morning and then sign up then. You'll still get all the bowl stuff and you can still do the bracket for sure. Make sure you get in the bracket by Friday night because that's a really fun one. It's like an NCAA basketball bracket, but for football. We want to see you there. We'd like to get that number over 400. Okay. Let's break down Indiana, Notre Dame. We're going to dive in and do this pretty deeply. And then Shehan Jeyarajah will join us at the end of the show. But it's time for Landis and I to start talking ball here on Kings of the North. All right, Landis, time for this Indiana Notre Dame big game breakdown. Why is it big? Because you're going to be there.
That's right. No other reason. No other reason. It's just me. Yeah.
Notre Dame is favored by 7.5. This is the Friday night playoff game at 8 p.m. on ABC. Just feels like I like the vibes around this. The ticket prices are sky high. I think there's been a little back and forth about Notre Dame fan base and Indiana fan base. And there's a part of me that wishes
Aren't Notre Dame fans like aren't Notre Dame fans like calling Indiana fans poor?
Well, that's
yeah.
Now
which is like
there's a back and forth. You had to get very specific and nasty, but
Mark Cuban seems rather well off. Just to
that's true.
Give a little credit to the Indiana fan base.
So the vibes like these. This is as northern as you can get, but it's also is more important. It's as Indiana as you can get. So like, are you excited? What do you think about the vibes about this before we get to like offense defense breakdown?
I'm fired up for the vibes around this. I think it's great. I was actually like, as we were trying to figure out what the playoff bracket was going to look like, I wasn't super enthused by the idea of, I guess, really just any North versus North game, which obviously included this one. But now that we have it and we're pretty close to it, and just seeing the energy around this game, I'm pretty excited for it. I think it definitely has the opportunity to be the best environment of the first round, just because of I guess I would say familiarity, although Notre Dame and Indiana do not play a ton, but just like the proximity, obviously, of the fan bases and what this means for Indiana, and like the kind of run that Notre Dame feels like it is on and that it is capable of in this playoff. There's just a lot going into this that I think is going to provide for a really exciting atmosphere.
So they played in the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. They haven't played since 1991. And that 1991 game was the first time they'd played since 1958. Mm-hmm. So they're in the same state. They're not on each other's radars. Not in a way like Purdue and Notre Dame have a rivalry. There's none between Indiana and Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has won the last 6. So they haven't played since 91. And Indiana hasn't beaten Notre Dame since 1950. So there's a lot of fascinating stuff. There's a part of me, again, that I wish, like, if you move some things around a little bit, you could have gotten all north-south matchups. But this is cool. So let's start Notre Dame offense, Indiana defense. Riley Leonard and the guys against Mikhail Kamara and the guys.
That's right. If I told you that Notre Dame was like slightly above, but closer to middle of the pack in like overall rushing rate, just how often they run the ball, would you be surprised by that?
I would be surprised by that. I thought that I'm calling them the 4th service academy this year.
Right. And the service academy is running about 80% of the time. Notre Dame only runs it about 56% of the time, which is still, that's pretty high for a power conference offense, or a team that that at least recruits that way. But I was likewise surprised by that. So it's still a team that wants to run the ball first and foremost. I think we all know that about Notre Dame and kind of how they go about their business. So we have here an offense that is 10th in the country in rushing yards per game, 5th in the country in rushing touchdowns, and 3rd in yards per carry, against an Indiana defense that is number 1 in the country in rushing defense yards per game, number 2 in the country in yards per carry. Okay. So I think on paper, right, you say that's strength on strength. Good. Obviously. Yeah. But I guess the one thing I would sort of like throw out there as it pertains to Indiana's run defense is how much of that statistical profile is like game state, right? Because they, prior to playing Michigan, they just beat the crap out of everybody. Like how often were those teams running the ball / like how good of running offenses were they actually? But even that, like that being said, the fact that Indiana has only given up 100 rushing yards 4 times this year is pretty impressive. It did a pretty nice job against Michigan. Michigan had 69 yards on 34 carries in their game in Bloomington towards the end of the season. So I think maybe the rushing statistics for Indiana's defense could be somewhat misleading, but it is still a very good run defense. They tackle really well. I think they are technically sort of very sound. They overcome, I think, I wouldn't even say like a lack of athleticism, maybe just like a lack of depth at times by just, not beating themselves on defense. And that starts with the way that they stop the run. So if Indiana can show up to Notre Dame Stadium on Friday night and give the Irish more of a fight than they're anticipating, or more of a fight than most of Notre Dame's opponents have been able to give them in terms of stopping the Notre Dame rushing attack, then I think we have a game here. And I actually do, like, for all the conversation we've had about Indiana and its struggles against Michigan, even though it won that game, and its struggles against Ohio State in that loss, I don't know that I hate this matchup for Indiana. I don't know that I view this as while Notre Dame is very good, in a lot of different ways. I don't know if I view this as quite the same thing for the
like
Hoosiers
you'd hate the Ohio State matchup for Indiana. And we hated it in the time because there's just such it's a bigger raw talent discrepancy where Notre Dame is obviously talented, not quite from a recruiting profile on the same level of Ohio State or Georgia. And then again, Notre Dame's had a decent number of some of its best guys get hurt. That Notre Dame is a little bit like their profile is more depth, don't make mistakes, machine-like. I actually think a lot of this is Notre Dame is a more talented version of Indiana, which is okay. We at least recognize this. I want to bring something up. I don't know if I have to. I don't think do I have to whisper it because it's not. This is a conversation they're in, right? They can't revoke Indiana's playoff spot at this point, right?
Correct.
They can't put Alabama in the spot. Okay.
They cannot.
I'm not sure about how good the teams are that Indiana played. So anyway, but here's the point about this. And I actually think this is a great point, Doug. Great point, Doug. I think we should and will have room in the playoff for surprising underdog teams who maybe don't have a incredibly tough schedule, who play well all year and win games and get in the playoff. I actually think there should be a spot for that. Just like there's a group of 5 spot, hey, man, I don't know what to say. I didn't think you were going to be this good, but you won almost all your games. You're in spot. So this is not a case against Indiana getting in the playoff. But I know those people down there would use my words to try to get Alabama, just like how Marshall said we don't have any players, so they replaced them in the bowl game. If somebody said, hey, that Northern guy was like Indiana played a weak schedule, could we get Bama in like on Friday? Just tell them fly up Friday morning and play. So I'm not talking about it from a resume of getting in, but I think now in analyzing the game, I certainly did it on my side of the ball. I think it is fair to say, I don't know how many teams Indiana has played who are as good as Notre Dame, and it's probably 2, and they didn't look that great against them. So, is that just a fair analysis of a team that is worthy of being here?
I think it is a fair analysis. Yeah, that is the reality of Notre Dame's path to this playoff, which I still think they earned because they didn't.
Of Indiana's path.
Of Indiana's path. Their non-conference schedule was awful. They had no control over what their Big Ten schedule was, or also the quality of the teams in the league this year. I think they got a favorable draw. Clearly,
and as pointed out, they played in the Big Ten schedule the 2 teams who played for the national title last year. It's just neither Michigan nor Washington were like last year's version. So it's not like they were ducking them.
Another way you could say it though is that let me just pull a random team out. Indiana played a bunch of Oklahomas. And hammered and destroyed all of them. Yeah, and didn't. I'm not trying to Alabama think of played Oklahoma. I think right.
Alabama.
Maybe,
but they don't count that. We don't count that game, Paul. We don't count that game. But right. So, but I do think just a bunch of random Oklahomas. But I think it's possible. The 2 most important games that Indiana played when trying to analyze this Notre Dame matchup are the Michigan and Ohio State games.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you, because I was thinking that is true. Everything you said about Indiana's schedule is true. How many teams has Notre Dame played that are better than Indiana?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. So again, from my side of the ball, we'll get into this, but you start going through it. The best teams they've played are service academy, try hard, efficient, but right? So you can make that point. Texas A&M, week 1, real team for sure.
Definitely.
USC, lousy year. Lincoln Riley blowing games, some good players. So I think the USC game at the end of the year mattered. Louisville, decent team in the middle of the year. Georgia Tech, okay, but they did from my side, they played Georgia Tech's backup quarterback. So, but I think other than Texas A&M, you could argue that the best teams that Notre Dame played were Army and Navy. And then Indiana is a supersized version of Army and Navy in terms of efficiency and not beating yourself and that kind of thing. So I do. It's almost as true for Notre Dame as it is for Indiana.
The best defense, by the way, that Notre Dame has played to this point, at least just from a yards per game perspective, which I understand is not the best metric to use, Northern Illinois.
Oh, look at you. Look at that poll. Okay. Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. I think all of this is to say that maybe this is potentially a more even matchup than people are anticipating. I don't know. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know if you feel differently. Like I don't look at this as requiring a Herculean effort from Indiana to try to go win this game.
So can I strap you up to the KOTN lie detector of Northern aggression? Can we put that on you? Sure. Can we strap you in, Bill Landis? I'm just gonna ask you two questions.
Okay.
Question number one, you're strapped in to the KOTN lie detector of Northern aggression. Do you believe Notre Dame could win the national championship?
Yes.
Question number two, do you believe Indiana could beat Notre Dame?
Yes.
Okay. I agree. And that's the point we're trying to make here, that because the thing about these teams is they're both efficient. They don't beat themselves. And there's just a lot of knucklehead teams, mostly in the South, but Ohio State's a knucklehead team at times. Like there's some knucklehead teams here that if Notre Dame just does its thing, it's like, okay, if the knuckleheads are knuckleheads, Notre Dame can beat some really good teams. Mm-hmm. But Indiana's not knuckleheads. The question is Indiana talented enough? So your two answers sound odd, but I think are exactly right, which is why this is an interesting game to analyze.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's similar conversations we have sometimes. We're trying to analyze the college basketball bracket. It's like
yes,
you got a tough matchup or you got a good matchup, right? And I think maybe this is a situation where this could have broke a lot worse for Indiana, I guess is what I'm saying.
Agreed.
They get to play fairly close to home against a team that I think they can be competitive with. I'm not saying Indiana's going to win the game. We'll make our picks later on in the week. I get like going back to now the more specific conversation, Notre Dame's offense versus Indiana's defense. Like I'm interested in how that plays out with the run game, because Indiana, as I said, has been good against the run this year. The one thing that I'll continue to have on my mind, I had it on my mind against Michigan and Ohio State, and obviously that'll be the case here, is when does Indiana's lack of depth show up, and then what kind of impact does that have on the game? Because, and I'm talking specifically defensive line depth. Mikal Kamara, Linnell Carr, both ends, and James Carpenter and CJ West, the two tackles, have played 71% of their defensive line snaps this year. Okay. That's a lot. Kamara, Carr, and Carpenter basically don't come off the field. West does, because he's a bigger 300-pound type of tackle, but he's also their best run defender. So it's like you have to take that guy off the field sometimes. Maybe that's not great against a team like Notre Dame. And Indiana's run defense in the first half against Ohio State was really good. It was 2.5 yards per carry, I think. In the second half, Ohio State had almost 6 yards per carry in that game, because I think it just kind of wore on them. Michigan was also better second half compared to first half, though by not nearly the same kind of disparity. But like I was at that game, and we've talked about it at the time. Like I did feel like on both sides of the ball, the line of scrimmage was starting to lean in Michigan's favor as that game wore on, especially on defense. But even still, when Michigan was on offense, I felt that a little bit. So that is a fair question, I think, for the Hoosiers here. I would imagine they're going to start strong. It's like, can they really shut down Notre Dame's rushing attack for 4 quarters when it is a 3-pronged rushing attack with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price at running back and Riley Leonard at quarterback, and an offensive line that has a ton of momentum, has been playing really well for much of the year, right? There's just a lot of confidence with Notre Dame and its ability to run the ball, and there should be. That I don't think it's going to be a situation where, even if Indiana does do a nice job of stifling that early, Notre Dame, I don't think is going to panic and like deviate from that and try to do something outside of itself. Like, it knows it has to run the ball to win the game, and knows it has to run the ball to set up play action for Riley Leonard. He's really good on play action, to set up the RPO game for Riley Leonard, who I think has done a nice job throwing the ball this year, but it has to be, I think, within certain parameters for him to be an efficient thrower. If it becomes more of like a drop back game, then I really like Indiana's chances in that case, because I don't think Riley Leonard's that kind of quarterback. I don't think Notre Dame has the talent on the outside to go win a game like that. Mitchell Evans, a tight end, is really good. And Indiana has given up some stuff to tight ends. We've talked about Thomas Fidone at Nebraska, had a nice game against them. Washington, Kaliki Latu had a nice game against them earlier in the year. So that's probably a matchup to watch, is who covers Mitchell Evans, who covers Jeremiah Love out of the backfield for Indiana's defense. I think those are the two most threatening guys in Notre Dame's passing attack. I think D'Angelo Pons, the Indiana corner, will have his stuff handled. Jameer Johnson, the other corner who didn't play against Purdue, should play in this game. I don't know that there's a matchup on the outside that really scares you there. So it's stop the run, cover Mitchell Evans, don't get burned by an 80-yard screenplay to Jeremiah Love, and I think you have a shot if you're Indiana.
Both teams force a lot of turnovers. Both have a really good turnover margin. Again, not to repeat the obvious, but that could really matter here. I'm curious. Notre Dame's plus 16, Indiana's plus 15. So in the turnover margin, that's Notre Dame's tied for second in the country, and Indiana's fifth. So that's really important to this game. I'm curious what the crowd is going to be like. Again, I feel like there is a really good home field advantage at Notre Dame Stadium. The one game I was there this year, I think I really felt that. I think they believe in this team. They believe in Marcus Freeman. But I'm curious how many Indiana fans will be there in terms of, right, I think the visiting teams in these playoff situations aren't getting a ton of tickets, but the resale market and the fact that it is so close, I think it can be a factor both in the Ohio State-Tennessee game and in this game, where the visiting team is not certainly an easy drive away. But it would be very interesting for Indiana machine-like efficiency to come out and take a lead and force Notre Dame into situations offensively they don't want to be in.
Yeah,
that could be a huge deal. And then all of a sudden you force Riley Leonard into a 3rd and 9 throw that they don't really want to have to do. And D'Angelo Pons jumps a route, and all of a sudden that's the recipe here, right? That's the recipe for a lot of teams. Like, turn the ball over and force them. But I mean, if you let Notre Dame be Notre Dame, right? If what you're talking about, the Notre Dame run game, if they just wear them down, long day. And that's certainly do you think that will? You said it could. Do you think the fact that they keep those same defensive linemen on the field much of the game, are you kind of expecting that Indiana will get worn down eventually by this multifaceted Notre Dame running attack?
I think so. Yeah, that I think for anyone, not that you would need a Notre Dame lead, they're at home, they're favored, but I think that's probably the thing that would lead you to, even if you like some of the stuff for Indiana, just leads you to like Notre Dame is eventually probably gonna crack that. And because it's not that they are explosive running the ball. It's not merely that they are good at it. It's like they'll just keep wearing you down, and then all of a sudden, whether it's Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price, who does not get talked about a ton, but he is a home run threat. I was poking around on PFF. They have that breakaway yard stat, which is yardage you get on designed runs that gain at least 15 yards, which is like big, like long rushing plays. 63% of his yards are breakaway yards, which is the most in the country for an FBS back that has at least 90 carries. So Love will wear you down. Leonard will wear you down. They'll run them both in the red zone to finish drives, but then like if you get lulled to sleep, Jadarian Price is just going to run by your whole defense. So that is the thing that I am on alert for here. That it's like it could be 3 quarters of very good defense from Indiana, and then the fourth quarter, like what happened? Notre Dame had 2 40-yard rushing touchdowns, and that's what won them the game. Jeremiah
Love hurt during the USC game, but good to go.
Yeah,
Marcus Freeman has said that, given every indication. So this should be as healthy as they can be, given the injuries, missing 3 starters on defense and 2 on offense on the offensive line. Mitchell Evans, not huge stats, but I feel like has he been hurt at times this year? But this feels like I wouldn't. If this is the best game Mitchell Evans ever played, that wouldn't shock me. He's good, but this could be like the holy moly.
I think he has not maybe had that next step that people were anticipating for him. He was coming off of an injury last year, and I think was probably not 100% for most of this year. With a couple of weeks now to rest for this one, I'd expect you're going to get the best version of him. He's an excellent tight end. Multifaceted tight end too, but a real weapon in the pass game over the middle of the field. And I think you mentioned we were going through all the position groups on Monday that Indiana's linebackers sometimes have been a little susceptible in pass coverage. So, and I think more often than not, a safety would probably be on Mitchell Evans anyway. But just like it's that middle of the field area, linebacker, safeties. Can you get Mitchell Evans there in space? Can you get Jeremiah Love there in space? Because those are the game breakers in the passing game. It's not Bo Collins at receiver, right? He's had some nice games. It's not Jaden Greathouse at receiver. I thought Chris Mitchell at receiver might be that guy. Yeah. He's not really been that either. So I think Notre Dame is probably better at that position than it has been the last couple of years, but I don't think it's great still. It's still anything they do in the passing game, I think, is going to have to start with Evans and Love.
Mitchell Evans didn't have more than 34 receiving yards in a game this year until the last game against USC, his best game of the season, 5 for 59 and a touchdown. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's a little indication of, like, again, you're getting the best version of Mitchell Evans. But you think this is a fairly even matchup in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I think so. I'm excited to watch like Mikal Kamara go up against these Notre Dame offensive tackles that have been very good. Emil Wagner's only given up 1 sack this year. At right tackle, left tackle Anthony Knapp, who's a true freshman, had a pretty bumpy start. Amazing. but has been very good, I think, in the back half of the season. So they'll be up for it. I don't know. Riley Leonard's hard to sack. Notre Dame doesn't give up a ton of pressure, but even when they do, like, the pressure to sack rate for Riley Leonard is quite good because he's pretty slippery. So yeah, I guess that'll be a key too, kind of like not letting him get outside of the pocket, not letting him scramble for stuff and turning what should be broken plays into positive ones. But Kamara is one of the best pass rushers in the country. The linebackers will get in the mix too. They'll blitz the safeties a fair amount. So I'm sure, with it's not a pure bowl prep, right? It's a little shorter than that, but enough time to throw out some wrinkles that teams haven't seen. And I don't doubt that Indiana's defense might have some unique pressure packages cooked up for this one.
Okay. All right. Quick break. When we come back, we'll flip it. Indiana offense versus Notre Dame defense next on KOTN. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, back on Kings of the North. Indiana offense, Notre Dame defense in our big game breakdown. Indiana, number 2 scoring offense in the country, 43.3 points per game. Notre Dame, number 3 scoring defense in the country, 13.6 points allowed per game. I found this might be, sometimes it's fun to use common opponents to get a feel for teams. Edge to Indiana. Because Indiana beat Purdue 66-0, but Notre Dame beat Purdue 66-7.
Well, my pick is made. All right, we can move on.
Hey, Purdue. Hey, Purdue fan, how you feeling? Well, the other 2 big teams in state beat us 132-7, and they're playing each other and driving past our town to get there in the playoff on Friday night. And our basketball team's not quite as good as they used to be. So anyway, tough road for Purdue, but Barry Odom's a good hire. For Mo Index, Notre Dame defense number 2, Indiana offense number 3. So like the inside statistical stuff beyond the raw numbers. Indiana pretty good on third down. Notre Dame pretty good at stopping you on third down. I think a lot of the analysis here, Landis, and again, it's when we get to the Wednesday and the Tennessee-Ohio State analysis, particularly when it comes to the Tennessee offense. The main point, I think, of the Tennessee offense is that they destroy bad teams and they're not that good against good teams. Mm-hmm. This is not that. It is not as stark. But I really do think the conversation for the Indiana offense is, how much do you believe they are the offense that they were for 10 games this year, and how much are they the offense that played against Ohio State and Michigan, that didn't look the same? So I'm not saying we throw out the other 10 games, Landis, but I think particularly for this machine-like offense that I have referenced 100 times, that they started grinding their gears a little bit against the 2 big-time defenses they faced. It's a very reasonable conversation For Mo Index, the Ohio State defense was third. The Michigan defense was 17th. The Notre Dame defense is second. So those are the two best defenses they faced. Now Notre Dame's going to be in there as the best yet. You don't throw it out, but it's a pretty big difference. And I have some stats. It's a pretty big difference between what they looked like, especially against Ohio State, when Ohio State got pressure on Curtis Rourke and they couldn't do anything in the pass game, and they just had to run the ball, and then they couldn't run the ball either. So, like, how do we handle this?
Can I say, well, just potentially like a dumb football guy thing?
Yeah.
I think Indiana played not to lose against Ohio State.
Okay.
And was in self-preservation mode, just trying not to get boat raced and keep its spot in the playoff.
Okay.
So I don't know how much I hold on to that.
Okay.
And then against Michigan, the first half was great. The second half was not as good, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat it because it wasn't as good. But there were also some drops in the second half of that game that were uncharacteristic of Indiana's receivers. Had they made a couple of them, I think that game takes on a sort of slightly different look. Not to say that Indiana would have run away with it, but maybe Michigan doesn't have the ball at the end with a chance to win it. So there's some real issues in both those games, and it starts with Indiana's offensive line, I think. But I don't know. I don't know that I'm 100% holding that against Indiana as I try to analyze this particular game.
Okay. I think that's fair. I did some breakdowns of the Ohio State Michigan stats versus their stats in all the other games. Okay. Just very quickly.
Yep.
Third down conversions, 40% success. Ohio State Michigan games, 50.5% in all the other games. Now, part of this is, of course, you're better against lesser competition. But how stark is it? And now when you're playing good competition, it does matter. It's just something to keep in mind. There are two running backs, Ty Lawton and Justice Ellison. Averaged 4 yards per carry against Ohio State, Michigan. Averaged 5.5 yards per carry in their other 10 games. Curtis Rourke against Ohio State, Michigan, again, was terrible against Ohio State. 8 of 18 for 68 yards. This is most of the problem here. He was okay against Michigan. 17 of 28 for 206. But the stats combined, against those two teams, 54% completions. The rest of the schedule, 73% completions. Against those two defenses, 6 yards per attempt. Everybody else, 10.6 yards per attempt. So particularly him, and I wasn't you were at both the games and saw both these in person. Just that was not it. And so one of the things I'm very curious about is it feels like Indiana in the moment, and I think since, tried to put a lot of the passing game issues against Ohio State on the fact that their offensive line couldn't hear, and that it was the home crowd in Ohio Stadium that threw Indiana off. Now they're going on the road, so it's going to be the same deal, but maybe they'll be more prepared for it. But I also wonder if they're lying to themselves a little bit. It's like, oh, we just couldn't hear, it was fine. It's like, also really good guys on the other side. So If it's a repeat of that, now Notre Dame's not going to be as explosive offensively and put up huge points necessarily, but Indiana had a drive to start the game against Ohio State, and then they had a drive to kind of save face at the end. And for the middle 8 drives or whatever, their offense was non-functional.
Mm-hmm.
There's a version of a non-functional offense that could show up in South Bend for the Hoosiers on Friday night.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that I felt against Michigan that Curtis Rourke was necessarily rattled. As I said, I actually thought he made some good throws and there were some drops in that game. He was definitely seeing ghost against Ohio State.
Yes.
And that was the game that was on the road. The game against Michigan was at home, so that's a little more comfortable. I understand that. It is a perfectly valid point. This will be more like playing in the shoe than playing Michigan at home, because this will be a raucous environment. It'll be loud. You're probably going to have to go to silent count. And Indiana did not handle that very well. You would hope, now that they've gone through that experience, that they have a better plan for handling that in this one. And frankly, I don't like Kadek's a veteran center who's played a lot. I don't know that I accept it was loud as a valid excuse for for why Indiana's offense did not play very well against Ohio State, but that is what Kurt Cignetti said. So that's the thing, like that. It's all about, I guess, can Indiana's offensive line handle the environment and keep Curtis Work from being pressured. But I also felt like that game was an outlier for Curtis Work too. He's a veteran guy. He's fairly composed. I guess I'd be surprised if he looked similarly rattled in this game.
Okay. Curtis Work did miss a game with an injury, so he started 11 games.
Mm-hmm.
Against Ohio State and Michigan, he was sacked 9 times. And the other 9 games, he was sacked 8 times total. So again, it's like, what do you apply here? It's possible that when they are not at a talent disadvantage, they just do their thing, and they're so well coached and they're so efficient, they don't make mistakes. But then when you're at a talent disadvantage, it doesn't work as well. So that might be the full analysis of this, at least on this offensive side. Now, the other thing is, to your point, I'm not sure how many great offenses and great quarterbacks Notre Dame's defense has seen.
Mm-hmm.
So Indiana, again, is the number 3 offense in the Fermo Index. Offenses that Notre Dame's faced: Army 7, Louisville 10, Georgia Tech 23, USC 18, Navy 24, Texas A&M 31. So Notre Dame's faced 6 bad offenses, 6 including the team they lost to. 6 bad offenses, 6 decent offenses. One of the things that happened, I thought the USC game was instructive because some of this stuff, they just, even decent offenses, they weren't facing great quarterbacks. Again, like Georgia Tech, they got the 3rd string quarterback who just transferred, Zach Pyron, to Minnesota in that game. Navy and Army aren't going to throw the ball. USC picked on Christian Gray, the opposite corner from Leonard Moore. They were talking about it a lot during the game. He was targeted 12 times in the USC game and gave up 8 catches for 130 yards. That just happened. And some chunk of those were back shoulder throws, which Indiana does really well, does better than anybody in the country. Now, at the end of that game, they tried sort of a back shoulder throw by to the goal line, and Christian Gray, played it perfectly, had perfect coverage, got its head turned around. The USC defender fell down, and he picked it off and returned it 99 yards for a touchdown. So he had been picked on all day. And again, he's playing because Ben Morrison's hurt. And then at the end of that long day where he's getting picked on, he made a game-saving play. So it was like, all right, credit to that dude. But I would imagine he really had not been picked on that way in any other game this year, because, for instance, in that game, again, Gray gave up 8 catches on 12 targets. Leonard Moore gave up 2 catches on 10 targets.
Mm-hmm.
So they also threw the other side, but Leonard Moore just kind of shut it down. I would imagine Indiana's going to go after Christian Gray. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
I think I'm trying to think of like all the potential matchups in the playoff. I guess I haven't thought about it enough to say this definitively, but Indiana's receivers against Notre Dame's corners will be pretty high up there.
Okay.
These corners are good. Like Christian Gray is an NFL corner. I have no doubt about that. Leonard Moore is balling out for a true freshman. Like, he's been put into a big spot, and he has responded. He has responded very well. And Indiana has real guys at receiver if Curtis Work has time to get them the ball. And Notre Dame is going to play a lot of man coverage. They're going to press you. It's going to be a battle at the line of scrimmage. It's going to be physical. And I think Indiana's receivers, especially Elijah Surratt, are going to be up for that. So, like, ESPN, or I don't even know this game. I think the game's on ESPN or ABC, whatever. They should have like an alternate telecast where it's just the Indiana receivers against Notre Dame corners in this game. Curtis Rourke, I was looking, like, Indiana has not seen a ton of man coverage this year. It seems like they see far more zone than they see man. They're going to see a lot of man from Notre Dame. They've been pretty good against it. The receivers have been good. Curtis Rourke has been good, and Curtis Rourke makes big time throws. I think you're right. I think Notre Dame's I think Indiana will try to attack Notre Dame's corners. I think that's going to be an awesome back and forth that may well decide the game. Like, which those units plays better, Notre Dame's corners or Indiana's receivers, could be the thing that we look back on and say, like, that's what won, whichever team won this game. You're muted.
I muted myself because I'm coughing 400 times a show. Sorry.
Sorry.
Unprofessional. I apologize. It's playoff season. Doug, be better. Kurt Cignetti, they're a high-pressure blitz outfit. Quite a bit of man coverage, right? Hey, that's what you just said. But so blitz percentage. Louisville, Notre Dame's defense blitzed Tyler Shuck 30% of the time. Texas A&M in the opener, they blitzed Connor Wegman 36% of the time. They blitzed Jaden Mayava half the time. 50 dropbacks, 25 times they blitzed, 25 times they didn't. So they want to come after you, but Curtis Rourke's good against the blitz. He's been blitzed on 40% of dropbacks this year. He has the third best PFF grade among Power 4 quarterbacks against the blitz. He has the fifth best yards per attempt against the blitz. So he's not just like checking stuff down. He's making real throws. Again, I think a decent number of these, right, are just sideline, back shoulder. Here comes something. Okay, I'm going to put a ball in the spot for my guy to win. Ohio State blitzed Curtis Rourke 40% of the time. Michigan blitzed him 37.5% of the time. He really is quite good against this stuff, but Notre Dame's going to do it. So this is just leaning in, Landis, to I don't think either side's going to back down here. Notre Dame's going to come after him and play man coverage, and Indiana's going to say, okay, bring it. I'm going to get the ball out and give my guys a chance.
Yeah, I think we'll see how that ends up looking, right? Because Curtis Rourke has been good against the blitz, but he was not good against the pressure against Ohio State, in my opinion. I also I found it a bit bizarre that Indiana, there was one play where Rourke did get sacked where it was like they were pretty clearly trying to set up a tight end screen that just never developed because Rourke got hit too early. But it didn't seem like they were trying a ton of screens in that game. Maybe they get into that more against this Notre Dame defense if they can, to try to slow down that pressure a little bit. I think Notre Dame has to blitz because they don't have, Notre Dame has like a good defensive line, like a solid defensive line. I don't know that there's like a ton of dudes on the defensive line. Like Howard Cross is good, and I think he's healthy and he'll play. And Riley Mills is a good tackle, but they've had injuries at the edge position. I don't think they're super dynamic there when it comes to pass rush. So they have to send additional guys to really get after a quarterback. And in his offensive line just has to do a better job than it did against Michigan and Ohio State and picking that stuff up. And if they do, then I really do think Curtis Rourke is going to be able to make the throws necessary to attack Notre Dame's defense. To your point, they haven't played a ton of quarterbacks this year that I think have been capable of that. Yep. And Curtis Rourke is Curtis Rourke the best quarterback they faced this year? I think so, probably, right? Yeah. So I definitely think he's
no doubt.
Yeah. I think he's 100% up to making the throws that he needs to make to go win this game for Indiana, as long as the offensive line can do its part.
Howard Cross, who you mentioned, has missed the last 3.5 games with a high ankle sprain. Got hurt against Florida State. Warmed up against USC, but didn't play. So like that was how close he was. But he said, I just really want to be 100%. They've done okay without him, but he's a difference maker. And wasn't having quite the year. I think he had a little bit of a slow start, was playing better, then got hurt. Could be huge. I think he was my guy to watch, the most dangerous player, I think, in this region. His return, I think. Marcus Freeman basically made that point, right? Sometimes the coach, the next man up stuff, he just said, Howard Cross is an excellent player. And paraphrasing, getting him back is a huge deal. So I think that's a huge thing. One of the other things I don't have this stat specifically, but Kurt Cignetti said it. He said Notre Dame has forced 25 fumbles this year, which is like 2 a game. They've recovered 11, but again, recovering a fumble is luck. Forcing a fumble, is not luck, especially. Well,
seven of those are Navy
against Navy
throwing the ball off its own butt. Like they were really forced in that game. I get what he's saying, but
I want to do a Kurt Cignetti impression of him in a Pittsburgh accent saying, "We just don't throw the ball off our own butt. We should be fine." But again, this turnover margin, Notre Dame does get after you. Their turnover margin is predicated on them forcing fumbles. So watch for that. I don't want to say, it's not that I don't have a handle on it. It's that I really do think it could go either way. That Curtis Rourke is like, okay, I learned from this. The Ohio State game was an outlier. Bring what you got. Here comes the machine. Or, oh no, Notre Dame's defense is really good, and this looks more like the Ohio State game, and in a tough environment like Indiana just can't handle it. I I don't know. I want to watch the game and find out. Like I think it could go either way. I'm not doubting the Indiana offense, but I kind of wasn't doubting the Indiana offense going into Ohio State. And then it was like, oh, wait, they can't do anything. But they had a really good first drive. So I hope they're not tricking themselves. That's the main thing. I hope they're just like, listen, man, road crowds are loud. I don't know what to tell you. If you're good, you have to have a plan for it. So if they come out, you're going to be their post game. If Indiana gets blown out and Curt Cignetti's talking about crowd noise, you got to go after him, man. Like this is not welcome to the big time. This is how it works here. Like they have to have an answer for that. They cannot let crowd noise knock them out of the playoff. If Notre Dame's defense does it, so be it. Their defense is awesome, but let's not have that again.
I guess maybe the one thing that I will accept from the Indiana perspective is that there's a lot of G5 guys on that team. And let's be honest, like Indiana prior to this year has never played in a loud road stadium because the games weren't close enough to make them loud. True. Right. So I understand that it was an entirely new experience for a lot of the guys who were playing for Indiana in that game, even the guys who were more veteran and even the ones who had been in the Big Ten for a couple of years. So my hope for Indiana would be like, okay, you didn't handle that great. This time you have a better plan to do that. I think they will, right? I can't imagine that Indiana's going to let something like that impact them so tremendously for the second time this season. It could be a matchup thing where they can't handle the pressure from Notre Dame, but I don't know. I've liked Indiana's offensive line all year, as I said yesterday. So I'm somewhat hopeful that they'll put on a good showing here, if only because if they do, I think it's going to be an awesome game. But I think they're up for it. So like I have a lean. We'll make our picks later. I have a lean, but I've talked myself into this being a pretty fun game because I do like some of the matchups here for the Hoosiers on both sides.
Final stat here, just a reminder. Indiana scored an average of 17.5 points against Ohio State and Michigan. They scored 45.4 points per game in their other 10 games. So it's just a reminder of the reality. They need to bring their best. All right, let's talk about coaches in this game. Love this matchup. What do you think of this coaching matchup? 63-year-old Curt Cignetti, 38-year-old Marcus Freeman.
It's great. We love Sig for all his Signess. But I've also, like Marcus Freeman throughout the course of the year, I think you can see a coach who is becoming very comfortable sort of like in his own skin and in his role and the way he's running the program, the way he's challenging his team and the way he's defending his team at times too. Like, I think these are one coach who is, I guess, looking to establish himself at a different level, but has a tremendous winning pedigree in Curt Cignetti, and another one in Marcus Freeman, who's got a real shot here to like catapult himself to the top of the sport with this playoff.
Both got paid, man. Both got paid for these seasons. A lot of Indiana money going out because there's a lot of good football going in. Curt Cignetti is year 14 as a head coach overall, 130-36. Marcus Freeman, year 3 as a head coach, 30-9. I talked about this on the show. If he's 38, he has the bowl loss in the year that Brian Kelly left. If you take that away, he's 38 years old and he's 30-8, which I just think is fun to say. Sons of the North, Bill Landis. What do you think of that?
Love it.
Curt Cignetti from Pittsburgh, played at West Virginia. Marcus Freeman from Dayton, played at Ohio State. 2 true sons of the North. We want to reiterate for people that what matters here is where you choose to play football for us. You cannot control where you are from. So we are not, that's not the end all be all, but you do have choices about where you play football. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about like who chooses to be part of Northern college football programs. But when you get sons of the North who choose the North, Landis, that's when we double down, right?
Yeah. That's how you get yourself into the KOTN Hall of Fame, which will exist one day.
Oh my God. Yeah. Nardog, right? Greg Schiano, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We got some Northern Kings. Okay.
Bert.
Yeah, Brett Bielema. Yeah, we got some Fran Brown, Jersey to Q's. Little stop. Fran Brown talks about Georgia a little more than I would like.
Oh, we haven't. Have we talked about that? We haven't him saying "Go Dogs." Like, come on, Fran.
I know. Yeah. We get it. You worked there for 2 years. You did more good for them than they did for you. Like it's okay. Come on. When we have him on, we'll give him a hard time about that.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an edge here? Either way, we did coaching rankings on Monday as part of that show. Do you think there's a substantial advantage here?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is something new for both guys. I guess like Cignetti has coached in the playoff settings, and getting through the FCS playoffs and getting to that championship game is a bit of a grind. Even if the environments aren't quite the same and aren't the same as what they'll see in Notre Dame Stadium. So maybe there could be one. But I really do think like Marcus Freeman, like something about that Northern Illinois loss like changed him. Like it sucks that he had to take it, but I actually like I've sensed a difference in just like in his confidence with the way that he runs his program and the way that he gets his team ready since that game. That like I don't think it's a tremendous advantage on either side, even though Cignetti is more experienced.
You had Notre Dame 6, Indiana 7 for the coaching staff rankings that were part of our overall Monday analysis of these two teams. House money a little bit for Indiana. I'll be curious if they let it rip in some ways. If somebody's going to run a fake punt, I think it's probably more likely Indiana because you've already accomplished more than anybody could imagine. But I don't think there's like a huge intangible advantage here that, one team that Notre Dame's under a lot of pressure, they have to win at home and Indiana can just let it go. I think that could be more at play, for instance, in a game like Ohio State, Tennessee, with the expectations Ohio State had coming into this year. But I don't think there's any reason. And again, like we'll talk about cold and a couple other games. Obviously, these are two Northern teams. I don't think there's like an inherent intangible pressure, emotional, mental edge anywhere for anybody. Do you think there is?
No, I don't think so. I think both like Notre Dame certainly got there via a different path than I thought it was going to, but I think like 10-2, 11-1 in the playoff, hopefully hosting a game is about where Notre Dame thought it was going to be. And of course, like Indiana, for all the confidence that Curt Cignetti has, I think if you caught him in an honest moment, if you strapped him to the KOTN, whatever truth detector of Northern aggression,
that's right.
Yeah, I don't think he would have expected Indiana to quite be in this position at this point in the season. So, I don't know. There's a tremendous edge there either way, because I even think like Marcus Freeman with the way that Notre Dame has played since the Northern Illinois game to get to this point, and now that he has a contract extension, like I don't think he's feeling any job pressure about where he stands with Notre Dame.
Yeah. I think these candy cigarettes are bad for my lungs.
Maybe
often. I think that I was fine, Doc. I was fine. I started smoking candy cigarettes because Indiana had a good football season. And the doctor would be like, well, that's very understandable. Of course you did. I don't know what happened. It's not my lungs. It's just in my throat. Dry in my throat.
You got to get some tea, man. A little tea and honey.
Oh.
A little tea and honey. Yeah.
I am not are you a hot tea guy?
No, not typically, but I am when I have a sore throat or a cough. The tea with the honey does a really nice job. Yeah.
That works, like coats the throat.
Yeah,
the honey coats the throat. Oh man, I blew it. All right, hold on a second. I'll be right back after this on KOTN as I coat my throat with honey. All right, that's it for this breakdown. We're going to make all of our picks on Thursday, which will just give us a little more time to analyze and take everything in, and also give you a reason to watch on Thursday. But Wednesday, Ohio State, Tennessee breakdown. Thursday, Penn State, SMU breakdown, which means we're going to do a version of a Texas Clemson breakdown right now, because this is the one of the 4 playoff games that we don't really care about. It's the 4 p.m. game. It's on TNT. Texas is 11.5-point favorite. Clemson at Texas. Do you believe that the Texas defense is the best unit? I was
going to ask you that. Yes. I think it's either the Texas defense or the Oregon offense. And I would give a slight lean to the Texas defense.
Okay. So I think I agree with that, but in the name of like holding teams accountable to the best version, like of the opposition they've played, I'm not sure about who Texas has faced here.
Yeah.
Who am I impressed by that they held down? Because you can start going through the quarterbacks that Texas has faced this year. Davis Warren in the Michigan game, who actually was okay, threw 2 picks, but okay. Michael Hawkins in the Oklahoma-Texas game, the true freshman that had to play after Jackson Arnold got benched. Like, that's not much. They played Aiden Warner, the Ivy League transfer, when they played Florida. They didn't get Graham Mertz or DJ Lagway. So that's like, okay, well, of course you're going to destroy that guy. They got Marcel Reed in the Texas A&M game, who's a redshirt freshman who had taken the job from Connor Wegman, right? But it's like, I don't know, okay. Like, it's not like that guy's going to rise up and destroy Texas. I guess we're all supposed to think that Diego Pavia is the greatest quarterback in the country. He's fine, and he almost beat Texas. He's fine. He's wiggly. He can run a little bit. He's not better than Sam Levitt, is he? Or he is Sam Levitt.
He is.
Like, yeah. I think that's a decent comparison.
Yeah. No, that's a good comparison. About the same, maybe. Yeah, about the same. And I don't know. I mean, Arizona State's in the playoff with Sam Levitt. Congratulations to them. He's a very important part of that. But we're not looking at Sam Levitt being like, he's the number one guy in the playoffs. Like, Diego Pavia, he's fine. And then we think Carson Beck is bad. And Carson Beck might be the best quarterback Texas has faced. And Texas, in the regular season, picked off Carson Beck 3 times and lost anyway. So I think, again, let's strap you to the truth detector again. The lie detector of Northern aggression. Bill Landis, 2 questions. Number 1, do you believe the Texas defense is the best unit in the playoff? I mean, less so now that you've laid it out that way, but sure, yeah. For the spirit of the exercise, yes.
Number 2, do you think the Texas defense might be overrated because the SEC doesn't have any real quarterbacks and Texas hasn't faced anybody good?
Yes.
Okay. I think it's indisputable that Cade Klubnik from Clemson is the best quarterback Texas has played this year. And he might be 3 times better than anybody they've faced this year, which is why I think Clemson has a chance. Because I don't think they've seen this guy. Because he can throw it. He can run it like a squirmy little dude. He doesn't turn the ball over much. And just doesn't mean Texas isn't good, but they haven't seen it.
I don't disagree. I think, I was pretty confident that Texas' defense is really good, and now you're really throwing me.
There we go. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to poke holes in in good Southern teams. Yes.
But when you were ranking the defenses by how glaring their weakest spot was, you had Texas first, as if to say, and I said, don't really have one.
No holes.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
they're good. I'm wondering if they're elite. They're very good, but they have top end talent, and they have very solid guys 1 through 11. I'm not trying to dispute that though.
Yeah, I think I would still lean more toward elite because they just really haven't even been like surprisingly leaky in any game. The most points an opponent has scored on Texas this year is the 30 that Georgia scored, but a lot of that was on a short field. Yes. And then the 24 that Vanderbilt scored in a 27-24 win in that game. There's a shutout, there's a 7, there's a 3, there's a 3. I think they're good. Yeah. I don't know. I think I think it's good for any team in this playoff to like kind of check them on what exactly they face to get to the point that they're at. But all that being said, I still think Texas's defense is very good, and I think it's the best defense in the playoff.
Do you also think Texas's offense is capable of losing them any game in the playoff at any point?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Which for me makes it like, and you're gonna have Shehan Jeyarajah on to talk more, I think, intelligently about Texas, but the most fascinating thing for me with Texas, and I think perhaps in the whole playoff, is when does Arch Manning take over?
Yeah,
for that offense, right?
Right. And then Clemson, couple decent receivers like Phil Moffitt running back. And I don't want to overdo it with Cade Klubnik, but let's remember this guy was like the number 1 recruit, number 1 quarterback in his class, was here to be the next guy in line. And it's DJ Uiagalelei who threw off the Clemson line of succession at quarterback, right? They had it rolling for a while here. And I almost feel like maybe if DJ had been better, although then Cade got in there as a young guy, and I think there was some, when DJ was okay at Oregon State last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then Clemson didn't immediately go back to being Clemson. It's like, oh, was it actually DJ's fault? Maybe there's some things that are wrong with the Clemson offense. And I'm sure Shehan will talk about Clemson receivers and that kind of thing and some of the play calling. But I think Cade Klubnik might be underrated on a national scale now, because if he had just been like, oh, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, DJ Uiagalelei, who was awesome, Cade Klubnik is awesome, he's next in line. But they got it, like they broke the line, right? It's like one of those where it's not the same, right? When the line of succession for the throne is actually like through a cousin. It's like, oh yeah, we chopped that guy's head off, so now it's a cousin. And it's like, okay, well, are you still the same family thing? So it's a cousin. But I think he's pretty good. Do you think he's pretty good? I'm not going to pretend I've watched every Clemson game, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I would say I do think he's good. Like I thought, I like everybody else thought he was going to be good when Clemson got him and started playing him.
Yeah.
That development arc has happened slower than I thought it would, but I think he's probably playing his best football right now, which is not nothing as you go into a playoff. I definitely agree that he's the best quarterback that Texas has faced this year. And honestly, if Texas beats Clemson and faces Arizona State, like the two best quarterbacks Texas will play this year will be Cade Klubnik and Sam Leavitt. Because Carson Beck has just been stinking up the joint. So, Klubnik has flown under the radar a decent amount. And I think like Clemson as a program kind of has, not flown under the radar, but just kind of like, fallen out of contention and therefore has not just mattered very much to like the landscape of the sport the last couple of years. But he is playing well, and I think people maybe don't quite realize how much of a dual threat that he is. So that'll be something that the Texas has to contend with. I just don't know. When I've watched Texas's defense, I found it to be like just really kind of like suffocating. Like they just don't give you anything. And Clemson has been very inconsistent on offense this year. So I even while the nice things being said about Cade Klubnik, I still don't know that I like this matchup for Clemson. I think it's going to be pretty hard to score points.
I think Clemson makes more sense as a try-hard underdog than they did as one of the two preeminent programs in college football. I think Dabo's better as a I think Dabo's better as an outlier than as a king of the sport. That crazy guy. Everyone went crazy, by the way, because Clemson got a guy in the portal, but it's a junior college guy, right? And junior college guys have been transferring to major programs forever. So, like, get back to me when Clemson actually works the portal and just takes a guy who was.
They did host. They didn't get him, but they did host Will Helt, the defensive end from Purdue, who's transferring.
Okay,
he's a good player, by the way. We should keep him in the North.
Oh yeah. So. I don't know. Like I'm open to underdog Dabo. I'm open to it. I've not been a huge fan of overdog kind of Weasley Dabo, but I think this fits him better. Yes?
It definitely fits him better. Yes. Yeah. But
doesn't
I don't
necessarily mean you have to like him. But
I'm not rooting for him in any capacity. But it definitely fits him better.
Our friend, Ari Wasserman, remember him?
I do. Mm-hmm.
You saw who he picked to win the national title?
Did he pick Texas?
He did.
Yeah.
I did not hear his explanation for that. I would imagine, because it's what he said on our show when he was on last week, one of his, I think, outrageous predictions was that Arch takes over as the starter in the quarterfinals. I don't think they can win the national title unless they go to Arch.
I am in 100% agreement with you.
Okay. So this could be the moment, and I'm 100% sure that's part of Ari's prediction.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not this game. That's not the Texas we're getting right here. And I think Ari's case was they're not going to do it now, but they sort of need to have this game for maybe Quinn to be iffy and maybe Arch comes in to make it clear. that Arch has to be the guy from now on, that is a dangerous game, my friend. Of like, well, let's not play our best quarterback. I mean, it's sort of what Jim Harbaugh did in the first 2 weeks of the 2022 college football season, but those were like non-conference games at the beginning of the year. He's like, I'm going to put Cade
Carolina.
Yes. I'm going to put Cade McNamara and JJ McCarthy out there and let you see what we're seeing in practice, which will be everybody saying, you've got to start JJ McCarthy. And so Steve Sarkisian's going to do that in a playoff game? In a playoffs? Like, that's kind of crazy to me. So I think we could be kicking back on Sunday saying, man, if they would have played Arch more, I think they could have won the national championship. But they didn't put him in until the middle of the third quarter. And so by that point, Quinn's 2 back-breaking interceptions were too much to overcome. And then Klubnik ripped off some crazy 48-yard scramble, and Clemson won 27-24. And here we are. And the best team in the country is the Arch Manning Longhorns, who never fully existed. See ya in Ohio Stadium for the opener 2025, when Arch Manning will finally be the starting quarterback when Texas comes to Ohio State. I think that's where we could get.
I don't think they're going to wait to get Arch in. I don't think they're going to wait for Quinn's been plenty bad enough for them, I think, to. And I'm not saying Arch Manning's going to start against Clemson. I don't think that's what will happen, but I also believe that Arch Manning will be taking over for Texas, and I think it will happen in the course of this game.
Okay. Heck of an orange matchup. I just finished off my orange Gatorade. Yeah. What a beautiful, beautiful orange matchup. Okay. Anything else about either of these two games before we welcome in our friend Shehan Jeyarajah?
I just have written down on my notes here, how good is Clemson really? So, but I think like that's not the thing. Like Texas beat A&M, which was a nice win, I guess, and Texas beat Michigan, which I guess has aged a little better than we thought it might. But it's really only played like one potentially like really good team, I think, in Georgia, and lost both games. But I don't view Clemson as that quality of a team. Like Clemson, clearly Clemson lost to Georgia by a significant margin. Like they're a step down from this. So I don't know, for all of the like, oh, Clemson's going to give them a game and Dabo could be plucky and they're the underdog or whatever. Like this is the biggest spread of the first round for a reason. So yes, like I just like keep that in mind, I guess, as you're trying to analyze this game. Clemson is in the won the ACC because I got a favorable conference draw and then banged a 56-yard field goal to win the ACC championship. Right. I'll give him a puncher's chance because why wouldn't you? Dabo's got 2 national title rings, but I think this could also potentially get ugly. Okay. When we come back, Shehan Jeyarajah from CBSSports.com, based in Texas, will join us to talk a little more about this game. And there's a matchup that didn't happen that I would have been intrigued by that I want to ask him about. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises joined by an old friend, Shehan Jeyarajah. Shehan, man, great to see you.
It's good to see you too. I don't know what that graphic was. My goodness, you look like a freaking French emperor or something.
French emperor / Mickey Mouse impersonator is the perfect combination that I'm looking for. Little Napoleon, little Mickey. I'm right down the middle on that. Shehan is from CBSSports.com. He's from the College Football Survivor Show. Shehan, will you be at any games for the playoff? Are you planning to go anywhere?
I'll definitely be at the Cotton Bowl. That one's a local one for me. None in the first round at this point, but obviously things can change.
Things can change. Okay. I want to ask you 2 primary things about Clemson, Texas, before we get into your national championship pick and a little more about the analysis of this game. Did you want to see SMU, Texas? in the playoff.
It would have been a lot of fun. It would have been a lot of fun. There are a lot of teams. And by the way, when we get to the second round and Arizona State is potentially playing against Texas, this will also be true. There's a lot of kids on that SMU roster with ties to Texas, some who played at Texas.
Yeah.
So it would have been a lot of fun to kind of get to see that dynamic at play. And of course, like SMU joined the ACC for a moment like this, for the opportunity to go play somebody like this. So it would have been fun, but it's also not the end of the world.
Okay, because it would have been so similar to Indiana Notre Dame, that Indiana and Notre Dame share a state, but they don't really have much of a history playing each other. SMU and Texas obviously shared a conference for a long time in the Southwest Conference, but they haven't played since 1995 when that conference broke up. Like, does SMU want to play Texas? And Texas is like, we're not doing that. Or is just there's so many colleges in Texas, it's not even a discussion of whether should SMU and Texas play each other in the regular season.
I mean, I don't think that SMU necessarily has a strong, especially feeling about Texas, but like Texas is the brand, right? Like Texas is the place that you go. I think that more than anything, SMU wants an opportunity to punch up, whatever it looks like, whether it's TCU, whether it's Baylor, whether it's Texas, like any of them. I think that for them to get Texas in the playoff would have been special. Now, I think that some SMU people probably know that isn't a great matchup for them with the way that Texas plays defense right now. So this might not be the year that they want them more than ever, but I do think that they would love to get them at some point.
Okay. Let me ask you about, since I'm asking about SMU anyway, do you think they have a chance to punch up against Penn State? Or is that a tough matchup for them?
I think they do. You know, what's interesting about this matchup is that I think that from an offensive perspective, SMU has way more playmakers outside of Tyler Warren, of course, than what Penn State is bringing to the table. Like, they've got 5, 6, 7 receivers who I think can be big-time players for them. And they've got a quarterback. And, you know, for people who don't know, they made a quarterback change after week 2 when they lost to BYU. And Kevin Jennings is put in the lineup, replacing a, like, top 100 type player in Preston Stone, who won the AAC for them last year. And it's because of his playmaking. That's why they brought him in. Kevin Jennings is just a winner. He actually led to get deep into the weeds, he led South Oak Cliff in South Dallas to becoming the first inner city school district to win a state title since the Dallas Carter team featured in Friday Night Lights. So like, it's been a while. He has like deep ties to Dallas. He has deep ties from a football perspective. And so like, he's really good at taking yards and plays that are there. Now, again, against Penn State, there's obviously a chance that like they just match up so well with SMU's front that it's just going to be really difficult for them. But we saw SMU's offensive line improve a lot as the season went along. So I think that's going to be the question. Like, can SMU hold up on the offensive line against Penn State's defensive line? And if they can, I mean, I like a lot of their matchups elsewhere.
Okay. Now I want to ask you about high school football. Did you attend the Southlake Carroll Austin Westlake Texas State Championship game on January 16th, 2021 between Cade Klubnik and Quinn Ewers?
I did. I was there.
I knew you. Of course you were there. Nothing in Texas football can happen without Shehan Jeyarajah being there. When you watch that, did people know that we're here now with Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik? The players they were watching that game, does this make total sense to you? Like, oh yeah, no, these are guys who are some of the best quarterbacks in college football.
Well, Quinn was like a super known commodity at that point. He was already the number 1 player in the class of 2022 at that point. Of course, later that year, he ends up reclassifying, going to the class of 2021 and enrolling at Ohio State. So he was 100% known commodity. Cade Klubnik was seen as like a true blue chip, like a legit future starting quarterback. He was not yet the number 1 player in the class of 2022 at quarterback. But he was seen as really good. And just to get a little bit more into the weeds. So the other thing about that game was that it was between a father and a son coaching in it, because Todd Dodge was the head coach at Austin Westlake, one of the greatest high school coaches in Texas history. He actually previously coached at Southlake Carroll, and his son Riley Dodge, who was the quarterback whenever they won a bunch of state titles there, along with Chase Daniel, he coached Southlake Carroll and Quinn Ewers. So like the story had been that Todd Dodge had kind of been like, all right, I'm going to retire. But Cade Klubnik was this kid coming through their system who was so good that he's like, why not go win a few more state titles and then retire, which is exactly what happened. And so, and by the way, Westlake is still really good. They're playing this weekend for the state title as well. I believe South Lake Carroll is as well in a different division. So there are so many connections between these two quarterbacks, between these two schools, between these two programs. And again, it goes all the way back to the high school level.
Wow. So Austin Westlake and Cade Klubnik won that game. Cade Klubnik, 18 of 20 for 220 yards, ran 17 times for 97. Quinn Ewers, 23 of 39 for 351, 3 touchdowns, but 2 picks. Do you think that's stuck in? Is that sticking Quinn Ewers' craw? You think that like Cade Klubnik beat him in the national title game, the state title game?
Yeah, I think that it sticks with both of them. I'm in the day-to-day with recruiting, but they are two players who have been familiar with each other for a very long time, had a bit of a rivalry. Again, Quinn was like seen as the giant savior of Texas football and all this sort of stuff. And Cade Klubnik wasn't really recruited by Texas as well when he was coming out, even though he was, of course, the number 1 quarterback. And so I think that for both of them, I think for Quinn, he's sitting back like, well, this guy beat me in the state title game. And Westlake was a way better team overall than what Carroll was. Okay. It was kind of like a crazy, like, Quinn is so good run that got them to the state title game. And I think for Cade, like, he's looking like, what has this guy done that I haven't done? Why is he viewed like that when I, 1, beat him, 2, my team is better? Like, we did everything that we were supposed to do, and people still view Quinn as being this thing and me as not. So I think that there's a lot of emotions going into that game. It's going to be a lot of fun.
All right. Joined again by Shehan Jeyarajah from CBSSports.com. Great college football writer, also the host of the College Football Survivor Show. We used to do that show together. It's great to see. Look at you. You're just glowing. Look at you. Back when I knew you, look what you've done. Look what you've become, Shehan. Look at you. You're all grown up, man.
I'm a little more gray, I think, than when we used to do the show.
Oh my God, this was working with me. Is what happened. It turned you gray. During which quarter do you think Quinn Ewers will be benched for Arch Manning on Saturday? No.
Oh man, you're telling me that Ryan Day ruined another quarterback? Is that what you're saying?
I know. We're already halfway down the road of is Quinn Ewers going to come back and be the bridge to Julian Sayin in Columbus next year? So like, you don't want to. We got him coming and going.
I can't imagine.
Do you think what is the vibe you think with Texas? And is this just something that people from afar are saying, or do you think this is legitimately something that Steve Sarkisian needs to figure out during this game and the course of the rest of the playoff who the quarterback's going to be?
Well, I don't think that there's going to be a moment, frankly, that Arch Manning is the starting quarterback. Like, I think that Quinn Ewers is going to be the starting quarterback through the college football playoff. I will say, too, Clemson provides an interesting counterweight to Texas in this game, but I don't think they're going to win it. I do think that Texas is going to have to find a way to use Arch Manning one way or another. I think it's kind of been a waste, the level that they haven't this season. We saw him come in as a running threat in the Texas A&M game. He actually scored one of the 2 touchdowns that were scored by Texas that day. And I made the comparison before the season. Like, this should be a little bit of Leak and Tebow. Like, this should be a little bit of back and forth. Now, look, I mean, there are certain things that Arch clearly does better. Like, Arch has a better deep ball right now. He just does. Arch gives you a running threat. And I actually think that the issue with Texas hasn't been Quinn Ewers necessarily. It's been the fact that they can't run the ball consistently. And they lost C.J. Baxter, their number 1 running back, before the season. I don't think that they fully recovered from that. And I do think that Arch gives you that running component that you don't have with Quinn Ewers in the lineup, and you might need it with this roster. Now at the same time, like, Quinn in the short to intermediate game is just way better. He's better at ball placement. He makes better decisions right now. But the other thing too is that when he has to throw the ball 35 times, there's a mistake in there. You mentioned in that state title game, he threw 2 interceptions. And again, a lot of it was because he had to force things against one of the best defensive programs in the history of Texas high school football in Westlake. One of those, by the way, was picked off by his future Texas teammate, Michael Taft, who was a walk-on at Texas, now an All-American. So, like, again, more connections there. But I think that the big thing is going to be not just in this Clemson game. I think that's thinking too small about it, but in the Arizona State game, depending on whether they get Oregon, Ohio State, whoever in that next game. I mean, I think the reality is like they have to find a way to move the ball consistently that isn't just on Quinn Ewers, because I think that it's not fair at this point with the skills that he's shown and the deficiencies that he's shown to expect him to just carry this team through the playoff. He's just not that kind of quarterback.
I like the commercial. I like the Dr. Pepper commercial where they make fun of the fact that Quinn Ewers has the most famous backup in college football. But then I did think it was odd. I think that commercial was airing during the regular season game against Georgia when he had been benched. And it's like, oh my God, this is uncomfortable now. Yep. This is unavoidable, right? When you have a veteran guy returning and a super famous, very talented young guy. Has Steve Sarkisian handled this the right way? You're saying that they probably should have been playing Arch more already. Are there egos and feelings, I think that would be natural, that have played a part in this? Do you think it's been hard for Texas to maneuver? Like it's too much talent. It's too much talent at quarterback. How do you think they've handled it?
Well, I think that Sark has gone into this with the perspective of my job is to make sure that people know that Quinn is the guy until he's not.
Okay.
Right. And like, I think that he wants there to be no question of who the guy is, who the starting quarterback is, because if people outside start to really question it and he's not consistent in his message, well, the guys in the room are going to start to question that.
Right.
And the other guys on the offense are going to start to question that. And this is Quinn's team. Everybody says this is Quinn's team. Now, again, like I think that there's an understanding across the board that like there are things that Arch can do that Quinn can't do right now, and that there are aspects that you probably do need to get him involved. I think that Sark has handled things the right way overall. Again, I think that especially getting later in the season, I would have liked to see a little bit more wrinkle, but some of this too is like, I mean, outside of those Georgia games, and those Georgia games happen, like they've kind of crushed everybody. And so there hasn't been a need to insert all this extra stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence that you saw some of the first wrinkles of this in the Texas A&M game, a really competitive game in a really emotional spot that, frankly, you could not lose. So I do think we're going to get more of that in the college football playoff. Maybe not even against Clemson, but maybe when you get more to the second and third round. But I do think that they're going to have a plan for it. And ultimately, they know. I mean, if you win, nobody really cares how this was all handled.
Yeah. Do you think Texas can win the national title?
I think they can. This side of the bracket is really tough. Like I think it is so much tougher than the other side of the bracket because you get Texas, you get Oregon, you get Ohio State all on this side. I think that Oregon and Ohio State to me are probably the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country in terms of quality. So Texas, even if they are a third, like they'd have to potentially go through one of the top 2. Yeah. Again, this running game component is going to be huge. Now, I think that like one of the benefits, right, of the college football playoff and the postseason is you get 10 days, 2 weeks to basically have like a mini spring camp. So like maybe you move somebody over and they get full-time reps at running back. Maybe you grow up some of your young guys. Like there are things that I think can happen during this stretch that could be really beneficial to Texas. But, you know, I do think that they can win the national championship. I do think that they are capable of it. Because, you know, again, I think that all 12 teams in the field, like everybody has flaws. Nobody's a perfect team. I don't think that there's a 21 Georgia, 20 Alabama, 19 LSU necessarily, 23 Michigan even. So I do think that it really is going to come down to matchups. And that's where I have just the slightest bit of a hard time is I think that the matchups in this side of the bracket are going to be really tough. But if you get through, I don't think that there's anybody that truly scares you.
Okay. So for CBSSports.com, you guys did your picks.
Yes.
And you picked Ohio State to win the national title. I know this was a difficult pick for you to try to make. Some of your thought process I thought was very interesting. What in the end led you to the Buckeyes as your national title pick?
Well, I do think that there's a real chance that the winner of Oregon Ohio State in the second round wins the national title. Like that might be the battle of the two best teams in the country. I look at that game. Ohio State went on the road. They frankly should have beat Oregon, right? I mean, if Jeremiah Smith doesn't commit an offensive pass interference or kicking a game-winning field goal, just in terms of trying to judge their quality, of course, I think, look, it gives me a little bit of pause that Ohio State is down two of their top three offensive linemen. I think that's real, but you do get a little bit of that time off, at least, like I mentioned with Tex with the running backs. Like, you get to grow up your offensive line a little bit, hopefully through reps. I think that their defense, it's either them or Texas, to me, have the best defense in the country. And the difference to me is that I look at Ohio State versus Texas, and even versus Tennessee, who might be a third or fourth best defense in the country. And like, you kind of get that only with like 5 All-America caliber skill position guys. So, and look, this was the message coming into the year, and they lost 2 games anyway. That's the struggle. But I do think that at a certain point, I'm sure you guys have plenty of Ryan Day conversations. So I don't want to just turn this into one, but I do think that there is something to the idea of going into that game. They're like, well, we want to win our way. And I think going into the playoff after, you're kind of desperate, to be honest. Like, I think that you're kind of a desperate program right now. I think you throw all that out the window and you just say, we just got to win the dang football game. And I think the moment that they do that, they're going to be really hard to beat. Will it happen? I don't know. I mean, we had all this talk about Arch Manning. I mean, I don't know. Is there a Julian Sayin conversation at some point that needs to happen as well? But I do think that overall, like, Ohio State is far and away the best roster in the country this year. Like, I don't even think it's that close. And so the real question is, are you going to be limited by 1, the coaching staff, or 2, limitations of the quarterback? And I just think that they have enough that they can move past both of those factors. On the offensive line injuries, as you mentioned, they might be doing some shuffling there, trying to figure that out. I want to see him against Tennessee. And I think if you get the right schematic adjustments, get to the perimeter, use your skill guys the right way, and there's no emotional hangover from Michigan, then it's like, okay, I think that's a great national title pick. I think they'll do that. I'm not sure they'll do that, right? So it's hard because the last time you saw them, it was not it at all. But I think all the other points you made, I really agree with. And it's just one of those things. It's their fault. And again, like, Oregon kind of has to bear the brunt of it to some degree, that like Ohio State blew it against Michigan. And now this matchup that could have been a national championship game potentially, or at least a semifinal, is going to be a quarterfinal. But the other thing is, I think when these teams played each other in the regular season, they knew we're probably going to see you again, and we're going to have to beat you to win the national title. So then, whether that's in the quarter or a semi or the title game, doesn't really matter that much. So I just found it to be a very interesting. Did you get any guff for that? Did people love it? Did everyone in Ohio and the North having a parade for you? What was the react? Well, it's funny in extremely social media fashion. So I posted it with the caption, I'm picking Ohio State to win 3 straight upsets and win the national title. And look, I mean, upsets is obviously like a ranking perspective, right? Like, it's beating the 1 seed in the second round. It's beating, I have them, playing the number 3 overall team in the third. Like, people got more mad about the fact that I called those wins upsets than they acknowledge the fact that I picked Ohio State to win the national championship. So, no, I mean, a lot of stuff that you'd expect. Also, a lot of Michigan fans being like, did you not just see him? And I'm like, you know what? Like, I think that it's fair to say that Ohio State has a mental block, and Michigan can run with that as long as they want. They're not going to have to play Michigan in this field.
That is correct. Yeah. And I retweeted, when you put that out there, I retweeted it right into the mouths of hungry Ohio State fans who are looking to have their feelings hurt about something. But I'm excited. Are you excited for that? Like, I think this has been a great regular season, and I can't wait for the playoff. What have you thought of this whole new world of college football?
Yeah, I've loved it. I think that there are a number of positive unintended consequences that I think have happened. One, I mean, just to be frank, right, as a national college football writer, I've been given more free reign to write about the group of 5, about, teams that you wouldn't necessarily think of than I think there's ever been. Like, everybody was excited about Boise State. Everybody was excited about UNLV. And I think that's a really cool consequence of this. And I think it's something that they really tried to think about. And I think the other thing too is like, we've talked about it before on the College Football Survivor show, but like, I think that college football in some ways was like preparing itself for this moment of there being a 12-team field. Because when we went from like 2 or 3 teams just crushing everybody to all of a sudden it's like, I mean, look, is there a chance that Georgia just runs the tape? Like, sure. But like, also, I don't think this Georgia team is especially unbeatable. I don't think this Texas team is especially unbeatable. Okay, well, you got your dogs on. That's a lot of faith in Gunnar Stockton, I'll be honest.
No,
but
this is only ironic. This is Georgia is so mid. I can't believe how mid they are.
And so I think that like this has worked out really well. Now, the thing that I think like I have the slightest bit of fear about is if the teams that get a bye with the Arizona State and Boise State, if they lose big, I feel like we're going to run into some trouble with people complaining about the auto buys. And I really like the auto buys. I like that reward. But, again, that's going to be something that we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Because, by the way, if Arizona State goes and beats Texas, I don't think anybody's gonna be complaining the same way.
Yeah. No, I think there might be tweaks coming, but I think overall, maybe by accident, they've managed to create something awesome for college football fans because this sport doesn't plan much of anything, but we may have stumbled into this, so I can't wait for it to happen. Shehan, thanks for your time. You can find Shehan, College Football Survivor Show, wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course at cbssports.com. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yarosowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks, as always, to the great Bill Landis for being here. And we will see you guys Wednesday for an Ohio State-Tennessee big game breakdown. For now, hey, look, Shehan's going to end the show with us. Say goodbye, Shehan. He's waving goodbye to everybody. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.